Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and today I want to talk with you about something from one of my favorite planes, Kamigawa. Magic has always had what I'll call the two-state problem. This is a challenge in almost any tabletop paper game. You're playing cards which tell a story through their abilities. Jade Statue is both an inert artifact sometimes and a creature other times it comes to life. However, you only have one static piece of artwork to show. This has been a problem since literally the beginning of Magic. Take the card Goblin Balloon Brigade. The art has to communicate to your opponent if it's a flying creature or not. So either you have to show a card as flying through the air or on the ground. So when a creature like Goblin Balloon Brigade can sometimes have flying, it poses a huge communication problem. Here, the artist tries to solve it by showing some of the ground and some of the air, with the balloon in the middle. This is a noble solve, but still easy to get confused about. Nearly 30 years later, this is still a problem. There just is no good way to solve it. You can show a creature with wings standing on the ground, a creature good at jumping or with temporary wings like Arrogant Poet, or even still the Goblin Balloon Brigade method of showing it near the ground, like Mystic Skyfish or Burdened Aerialist. I still honestly have no idea how Infernal Pet flies, but it presumably has wings somewhere. But none of these methods would be as good as actually seeing the creature go from standing on the ground to flying, something you can't really do with a single piece of artwork. Another great example from an early Magic set is phasing in Mirage Block. How do you show something that sometimes isn't there? If this were a movie, you'd see Teferi's Drake and Teferi's Imp appear and disappear. But on a single static image, you either have to show the creature or not. And when it comes to Mist Dragon, the sometimes flying, sometimes not, sometimes phased out card, well, good luck. In Magic's history, the best solve we've ever come up with for this came in original Innistrad, with transforming double-faced cards. This changed everything. Suddenly, instead of having one piece of artwork, we had two. We could show the transformation from human to werewolf, creature to planeswalker, and cursed church to summoned demon. Part of the reason we've gone back to the double-faced card well so many times since Innistrad is because of how well they can communicate this act of change. But they aren't the first attempt at this. That came close to a decade earlier with Champions of Kamigawa. The team around then had a similar idea. They wanted to show normal creatures that upgraded into legends after they had accomplished incredible feats. But there was the two-state problem. How were they to solve it? Their solution was something wild, putting two cards on one face, kind of like a split card, but with creatures. They came up with the flip cards. The way these worked is that you played them as their top half, the side with the mana cost in the top right. But at some point, when you met their condition, you would literally flip them around and they would transform into their legendary selves. This mechanically showed the state of change, and it also did artistically. In the art box, both sides of the creature were represented, so you could see it before and after. This was wildly innovative and very eye-grabbing. Some of them were even big tournament cards of the time, like Jushi Apprentice and Nezumi Shortfang. The mechanic evolved with creatures that you might want to not flip, like the key counter cycle of cards like Badoka Pupil, and legendary creatures that turned into enchantments. And then it was never seen again. Outside of a couple reprints, all 20 of the flip cards in Magic's existence exist only in Kamigawa block. What happened? Well, there were a few problems. The first was simply space on the card. Something Magic designers are constantly fighting against is having enough room on a card. And on flip cards, your space is reduced by a lot. You have very little room to communicate each side. The top half is basically locked into, at most, a keyword and a simple ability that explains how to flip it. And so then the bottom half gets to do basically one splashy thing. But for a mechanic which was supposed to give room to tell a story, it actually cuts out a lot of the space needed to do just that. Second is the artwork. In theory, the idea of showing two pieces, one for each half, oriented in the direction of that half of the card was cool. However, in practice, it kind of became a jumbled blur at card size. When you're looking at a card in your hand or across the table, it's so hard to see the details. And although the artists tried mightily to create that separation in the middle, it's just hard to tell. The cards are very cramped. And finally, they were confusing. Could you cast it as either side since there was just one mana cost? When you tapped it, did it turn back into its previous form? Literally, tapping your card the wrong way could make it look like it was flipped to a bystander watching the game. Despite their innovation, flip cards were not a hit. The idea was great, the execution, not so much. But Magic is a game built upon itself. And it's because of the building blocks of flip cards, we were able to get double-faced cards in original Innistrad, a version of this that does work. So what is in the future for flip cards? Well, occasional Commander deck reprint aside, I don't think you'll be seeing them again. In addition to everything I mentioned before, perhaps the most problematic part of flip cards is that double-faced cards just do what flip cards were trying to do, but better. Instead of having your text box room to tell a story, you double it. Instead of squishing your art into the middle of the card, you get two clear pieces. But their impact on Magic has definitely been felt. And hey, as a fan of Kamigawa, that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. You never know when I might be able to convince somebody to put a new one in a Commander deck, especially since right now, we don't do double-faced cards there. So as we go back to Innistrad, when you see a double-faced card, don't call them flip cards. That honor belongs to another. What do you think about flip cards? Would you like to see them again? Or do you just want to see us stick to double-faced cards? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll talk with you again on Monday. And in the meantime, may you flip out about some new cards. You got this. You can't play double-faced cards without sleeves or checklist cards. Putting sleeves into the product is not really an option. We don't make sleeves. And if you use checklist cards, well, while one or two might be all right, imagine with a werewolf deck, cracking open your deck, having 30 checklist cards staring back at you, which